I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to walk around feeling like my life was a bad sitcom, you know? Like some cruelly written plot twist that nobody in real life should ever have to deal with. But here I am. I'm 34, married for almost 7 years to what I genuinely thought was my ride or die. And I've just discovered my entire sense of reality is built on a foundation of lies I didn't even know existed. It all started on our anniversary. I'd woken up early, thinking about breakfast in bed, candles, maybe even that cheesy playlist she liked when we first started dating. I texted her, a little playful, "Happy anniversary, babe. Don't work too hard today." She replied almost immediately, "Thanks, love. Yeah, swamped at the office. I might be there late, sorry. We'll celebrate tonight." I swallowed the disappointment because I believed her. I mean, she always loved her job, and she'd been on some big project for months. I didn't even think twice when I ordered flowers for delivery to her office desk, the same ones I knew she'd love, the purple orchids, not too flashy, just her style. And I set the delivery time for mid-afternoon, so she'd have them while buried in spreadsheets and conference calls. Then, the first weird thing happened. A little after 3 p.m., I got the confirmation email from the florist, delivered, signed for by Matthew. I blinked at my phone, assuming it was a mistake. Matthew? I didn't know any Matthew who worked in her building. I double-checked the company name, the floor, the suite number. Everything matched. My heart started to pound, but I tried to reason it away. Maybe she had a temp intern. Maybe someone signed for it by accident. Still, the pit in my stomach wouldn't let me ignore it. Hours passed, my mind spinning in circles, imagining all kinds of innocent explanations and equally terrifying ones. By the time it was close to 8 p.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my keys, shoved my phone in my pocket, and drove over to her office. The building was quiet, eerily quiet. It was one of those modern glass towers downtown, the kind that looked impressive during the day and ghostly at night. I parked on the top level, my stomach twisting tighter with every step toward the elevator. When I got to her floor, I realized the lights were out. Not a single office light on, nothing except the dim glow from the emergency exit signs. But then I saw her car. There it was, parked exactly where I always remembered it, like a silent invitation to confront the truth. I stood there for a second, trying to convince myself to call her, to dial and ask where Matthew was, to maybe calm this whole ridiculous nightmare down. But then I saw them. My wife, holding hands with some guy, laughing softly, walking to the parking garage exit like they owned the night. My chest went ice cold. I thought I was seeing the wrong person at first. It had to be someone else. But then I caught a glimpse of him in the dim parking lights. The face was familiar in the weirdest way. Not from memories I had consciously, but something buried deep, a resemblance that made my stomach flip. And that's when I heard it. My wife called him Matt. Not Matthew, just Matt. My brain refused to work for a second. I followed them, not like some stalker out of a bad movie, but out of a mix of disbelief and raw, instinctive need to confirm the nightmare my mind refused to fully accept. They reached a black SUV, and she leaned in close, whispering something that made him laugh. The laugh, the way it bounced in the night, triggered a memory so sharp it cut through everything. A faded photograph from my childhood, a half smile, eyes that looked just like mine. I stopped cold. My legs refused to move. That's when it hit me in full force. Matthew wasn't just her coworker. He was my half-brother, the son my dad had abandoned when I was 7. I had known about him in theory, just a footnote in some bitter family story my mom tried to shield me from. But I'd never imagined the universe would have such cruel humor. I watched them get into the car, her hand still in his, her head tilted toward him in that way I'd once thought reserved only for me. My mind screamed at me to leave, to drive off and pretend I hadn't seen anything, but every fiber of me was frozen. The anger, the betrayal, the nausea, the disbelief, it all mixed into a choking, heavy ball in my chest. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make sense of it all. Instead, I just stood there, shaking, while they drove off into the night. And as the taillights disappeared around the corner, I realized something else, something that felt like being punched and stabbed at the same time. I had been blindsided not just by infidelity, but by blood ties I didn't even know I had. My wife had been sleeping with my brother, my father's son, a man who was, in another universe, supposed to be my family. And in that parking lot, under the sterile glow of the emergency exit signs, I understood the full depth of the betrayal. Not just romantic, but cosmic, like some twisted fate laughing at me. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Every possible scenario ran through my head. Confront her, call Matt, pack my bags, leave forever. But none of it made sense yet. Not until I could put words to what I had seen, until I could untangle the impossible knot that my life had suddenly become. And that's where I am now, sitting in my living room, lights off, staring at the floor, wondering how I could have been so blind. How the person I trusted most could destroy everything, and how my own family ties, ones I barely knew existed, had become a part of this nightmare. I still can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see them walking together in the parking lot, hand in hand, laughing. The next morning, I woke up like I hadn't slept at all, which, technically, I hadn't. My head was pounding, stomach in knots, and my mind kept looping that image from the parking lot. I sat on the edge of the bed for what felt like hours, staring at the floor, trying to figure out where to start. You know that weird moment when your brain and heart just refuse to sync? That was me. Every logical thought was drowned out by a gut-deep, soul-crushing sense of betrayal. I couldn't call her. Not yet. Not before I figured out if my brain was lying to me. Because, honestly, if she answered, and it turned out I had imagined it all, I don't know if I could have handled that. But every part of me, every frustrated, angry, broken part, needed answers. By mid-morning, I texted her casually, like nothing had happened, just trying to keep my tone normal, professional almost. Hey, did you get the orchids yesterday? Her reply came quick. Yeah. Thanks, babe. They're beautiful. Sorry I didn't text. So busy. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Reading those words made my stomach churn even more. I could feel the lie in every syllable, the practiced detachment, the way she assumed I wouldn't know. I spent the rest of the day doing the one thing I thought might give me control, digging. Not in a creepy, obsessive way. Okay, maybe a little, but I had to know. I checked her phone habits, saw a bunch of messages with Matt over the past few months, casual texts that got flirty, then intimate. She had been careful, but not careful enough. She'd slipped, enough for someone like me, someone hyper-aware of weird details, to notice. I wanted to confront her then and there, yell, cry, break everything in the house. But I also wanted to throw up. I couldn't reconcile the woman I loved with the choices she was making behind my back, and the blood ties just made it worse. Finally, around 7 p.m., she came home. She was dressed casually, like she had just finished some late errands, smiling like everything was normal. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might collapse. Hey, she said, dropping her bag by the door. Crazy day, huh? I nodded, voice tight. Yeah, long day. She didn't notice anything off. That's what hurt the most. The complete normalcy. Like she hadn't spent my entire anniversary night with another man. Like she hadn't betrayed me in the most intimate, gut-wrenching way possible. I tried to make small talk while dinner heated in the oven, but my mind was screaming. Every laugh, every casual word, every movement she made felt like a knife twisting. I kept thinking about the name Matthew, about the shared bloodline, about the fact that this wasn't just infidelity. This was betrayal on a scale I couldn't even process. Finally, I couldn't hold it in anymore. My voice cracked, something I didn't expect, because I've always been good at controlling myself. Who's Matthew? She froze, mid-step, like she'd been caught in a lie before it even started. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of panic, the instant calculation. She opened her mouth, then closed it, and I knew. I knew right there. He's a co-worker, she said slowly, carefully. Why? I slammed my hand on the counter, making the pots and utensils jump. Don't lie me. Don't lie. Don't even start. I saw you last night. With him. Hand in hand. At the office parking lot. On our anniversary. Her face went pale, and she opened her mouth again, but no words came. She knew. She knew I had seen them. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. Don't even try to explain, I said, voice shaking with anger and grief. I don't care what you call him, or who he is, but he's not just some random guy, is he? His name is Face. I trailed off, because I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to give that truth any more power. But she knew I was thinking it, and that's when she broke. Her shoulders slumped, and she whispered, almost inaudibly, Matt, he's your brother. I felt like the air had been ripped out of my lungs. My brain froze. What? My brother? My father's son? The one I'd never met? The one I'd spent my whole life wondering about? And she was with him? My wife, the person I thought I knew inside and out, had been sleeping with my own blood. I stumbled backward, gripping the counter for support. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, deafening, like it was trying to warn me before the next blow hit. She tried to approach me, hands raised in some sort of pleading gesture. I didn't mean for it to happen. Stop. I don't think I've ever said that so firmly in my life. Don't. Just stop. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the part of me that believed in trust, in love, in family. Every word she could say, every apology, every excuse, couldn't fix the raw, stabbing sense of loss I was feeling. And the worst part? It wasn't just her betrayal. It was my dad's too. The man who left me as a kid had somehow found a way to insert more chaos into my life decades later, through the one woman I thought would never hurt me. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her and him together, laughing, touching, existing in a way that was meant to be shared between me and her. I felt like I'd been punched, thrown, and left in the middle of a desert with no water. By the time dawn hit, I made a decision. I couldn't stay in the same house with her, not tonight, not while I processed this. I packed a bag, left a note on the counter that just said, I need space. We need to talk. Later. I didn't know how much later. I didn't know if we'd survive the conversation, or if I'd even want to. I drove aimlessly, letting the car take me wherever, just trying to outrun the images, the shock, the betrayal. But no matter how fast I went, no matter how many streets I turned, no matter how long I stayed on the highway, I couldn't outrun it. It was inside me, staring me in the face, and I had no idea how to fight it. The next few days were a blur, the kind of time that stretches endlessly yet disappears in an instant. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat properly. I just drove, walked, stared at the walls, replaying that night over and over. I kept thinking, how did I not see this coming? How could she? How could he? I went back through old photos and memories, looking for signs I'd missed. Birthdays, family dinners, Christmases, vacations. I replayed every interaction, every casual mention of her work, every vague reference to coworkers. And slowly, terrifyingly, patterns emerged. Those late nights, she claimed, the business trips, the team projects that conveniently landed on weekends. I started to realize she had been building this story for months, carefully, meticulously, hiding the truth in plain sight. And Matt, my brother, my father's son, it wasn't just betrayal, it was surreal. I kept thinking back to old family photos, to moments I'd thought were harmless memories. I wondered what my dad had told him, if he'd even known about me, about our shared history. And if he did, how much of what I saw last week was planned, orchestrated, inevitable? That thought made bile rise in my throat. I had to know the truth. I couldn't live in limbo anymore. So I called him, not in anger at first, not screaming, not threatening, just searching. My voice cracked when I said, Matt, it's Alex. There was a pause on the other end, then, Alex? That your dad's kid? Holy shit. I didn't know you'd know. The casual tone almost made me laugh, if it weren't so horrifying. My brother. My blood. Laughing about it like it was some bad punchline. Yeah, I know, I said, voice trembling. And I saw you. With her. My wife. On our anniversary. There was a long silence. I could hear him swallowing on the other side. Then, Alex. I didn't mean. I hung up. Not because I wanted to end the conversation, but because I couldn't handle the voice. Couldn't handle hearing him try to justify the betrayal. I drove aimlessly again, my hands clenched tight around the wheel. I was thinking about how blood can feel like both a shield and a weapon, and how twisted it was that my father's absence had left two sons who somehow ended up enemies in the same life. By the end of the week, I finally confronted my wife. I didn't yell at first. I just sat at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at her like I was seeing a stranger. She sat across from me, eyes wide, guilty, exhausted, like she had been running from this confrontation for days. Why? I asked simply. Why him? Why us? Why this? Did it even mean anything? She looked down at her hands, quiet for longer than I could stand. Then, softly, Alex, it didn't start like this. It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't know. I laughed, bitter, sharp. You didn't know? You didn't know it was wrong? You didn't know he was my brother? Her eyes filled with tears, and she tried to explain, but everything she said felt like a brick wall collapsing on me. She talked about loneliness, about excitement, about connection, all excuses that crumbled the moment I remembered the nights I'd stayed up worrying about her, working extra hours to surprise her, thinking we were building something real. And then it hit me again, the cosmic cruelty of it. My father abandoned me as a kid, left me with half-formed memories and a small, furious resentment that had never fully healed. And now, decades later, his other son shows up, not to reconcile, not to build anything, but to dismantle the one thing I thought was mine. My wife, my life, my trust. I left the table, pacing the apartment. I felt like a man with a fractured soul, pieces scattered in directions I didn't recognize. I wanted answers. I wanted revenge. I wanted to scream into the void. But mostly, I just wanted to disappear. I started retracing the timeline of their affair. Emails, texts, photos, receipts. Every detail I could find confirmed what I already knew. It had been months. Not just a one-time mistake, not a fleeting indiscretion, but a sustained deception that had been hiding in plain sight. And every moment they spent together, every secret message, every smile, they were building a world that didn't include me. I realized something worse than betrayal, complicity. I couldn't just blame her or him. My dad had set the stage years ago by leaving a fractured family, a story that would inevitably intersect with mine in the cruelest way possible. And in that web of deceit, I was just a pawn. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the balcony, looking at the city lights, wondering how someone could betray their own family so completely. I thought about confronting him again, telling him what it meant to me, to our history, but I also knew it would change nothing. Confrontation wouldn't undo the months of betrayal, the nights she lied to me, the blood ties I discovered under the worst possible circumstances. And somewhere in the quiet of the night, I felt the crushing weight of reality. I didn't know who my wife was anymore. I didn't know who my brother was, and I didn't know if my life would ever make sense again. All I knew was that the world I thought I had, my marriage, my family, my trust, was gone, and it wasn't coming back. By the time I reached out to Matt again, my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. I'd spent days trying to convince myself not to just let lawyers and divorce papers handle everything. But the silence was eating me alive. I needed to hear it from him, not some watered-down version from her, not some vague apology in a text. I needed to hear him admit what he did, and maybe, just maybe, tell me why. He picked up on the third ring. His voice was cautious this time. Alex. Yeah, I said flatly. It's me. Long pause. I could hear him breathing. Then, I'm sorry. That word almost broke me. Not because it fixed anything, because it didn't, but because of how small it sounded. Like he was apologizing for bumping into me at a grocery store, not detonating my life. You're sorry. I repeated, my voice low, steady, terrifying even to myself. For what? Sleeping with my wife? On our anniversary? Or for being my brother and hiding it? He exhaled hard, like he'd been holding it in for years. Alex, I didn't plan it. I didn't even know who you were at first. We met at work. She didn't mention you. It just happened. I laughed, a sound that felt hollow. It just happened. That's your excuse. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. I didn't go looking for you or your wife. Stop. My voice cracked, but I forced it steady. Don't you dare use we like you're some victim here. You knew. She knew. And you both kept going. He went quiet again. I could picture him on the other end, staring at the floor, trying to come up with something to make it better. But there wasn't anything. Do you have any idea what this feels like? I said. My father left me when I was 7. I spent my entire life wondering what kind of man he was, if he was proud of me, if he even thought about me. And now, decades later, his other son walks into my life, not to meet me, not to build a relationship, but to sleep with my wife. Do you get it? Do you get what you've done? I get it, he said softly. And I hate myself for it. I almost said good. But the truth was, I didn't care what he felt. Not right now. His self-loathing wouldn't undo the nights they spent together, the lies she told me, the trust they burned to ashes. I don't even know what you are to me anymore, I said. You're my brother by blood, but you're also the guy who helped destroy my marriage. You're my father's son, but you're also the living embodiment of everything he left me to deal with. I hung up before he could answer. I sat there in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, hands trembling. I felt like screaming, punching something, running until my lungs burned. Instead, I just sat, tears running down my face before I even realized I was crying. Later that night, I went home. She was there, waiting, sitting on the couch like a defendant in a courtroom. She'd been crying too. Her eyes were swollen, makeup streaked. For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. "Alex," she said softly. "Please sit. We need to talk." I stayed standing. "Talk about what?" "How you fell in love with my brother. How you lied to me for months. How you celebrated our anniversary by sneaking off with him." Her face crumpled. "I didn't. I wasn't thinking like that. It wasn't about hurting you. It was about you," I said sharply. "Always about you." She flinched, and for a second, I saw the woman I married. The one who laughed at my dumb jokes, who held me when my mom died, who promised we'd never hurt each other. And then that image dissolved, replaced by the woman who betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I don't even know who I am anymore." "That makes two of us," I said. I couldn't stay in the house. I packed more of my stuff, shoving clothes into a duffel bag while she sat there, crying quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just left. I checked into a cheap hotel on the edge of town. The kind of place where the carpet smells like cigarette smoke and the walls are thin enough to hear someone's TV next door. It was all I could afford on short notice, but in some weird way, it felt like freedom. No reminders of her. No echoes of my father. Just me, my thoughts, and the sound of a flickering neon sign outside the window. Lying on that scratchy bedspread, I thought about my dad, about how his choices had rippled through decades, poisoning things he probably didn't even think about. I thought about Matt, about how much of this was inherited, how much was just bad luck, how much was some cruel joke of the universe. And then, for the first time in days, I thought about myself, not as a husband, not as a betrayed son, but just as a man who deserved better than this, a man who had been broken, but maybe, somehow, could start over. I didn't know what that would look like yet. Divorce papers? Therapy? Burning every connection I had to both of them? All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the life I had before. It wasn't mine anymore. It had been stolen, repurposed, corrupted. And as I stared at the cracked ceiling, the hum of the neon outside mixing with the buzz of my own thoughts, I realized something else. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about survival, about figuring out who I was without them, without the lies, without the weight of a father who'd walked away and left a mess behind. For the first time since that night, I let myself think about the future, not as a question mark, but as a possibility. And even though my chest still felt like it was caving in, a tiny, defiant part of me whispered that maybe, just maybe, I could crawl out of this alive. The following weeks were the kind you can't prepare for. Every morning, waking up felt like stepping into a minefield. Emails from her, voicemail messages, texts, all carefully crafted to tug at the part of me that still loved her, that still hoped she'd somehow explain herself in a way that made sense. But every word was a reminder of what she had done, and what Matt had done, and what my dad had set in motion years ago. I started seeing a therapist, not because I thought it would fix everything, but because I needed someone to hear the chaos in my head without judging me. To validate that yes, my life had turned upside down. Yes, the betrayal was real. Yes, it hurt in ways I didn't even know a person could feel. In those sessions, I realized the anger wasn't just for her or him. It was for my dad too. For leaving me with this legacy of abandonment and deception. For leaving a brother I didn't know I had until he showed up and shattered my life. I felt rage that was old, festering, and new all at the same time. I thought about Matt constantly, wondering what kind of man he thought he was. Did he even feel guilt? Did he even understand that this wasn't just about cheating? It was about family, about blood, about trust? I eventually called him again. Not to yell, not to fight, but to put a line in the sand. My voice was cold, calm, controlled, but the words carried years of hurt. "Matt," I said, "this stops now. You're out of my life. Completely. And don't think for a second that blood makes it okay. It doesn't. You're my brother, yes, but that means nothing after what you've done." He didn't argue, just silence, then a soft, "I understand." I hung up and felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief because I'd taken control. Emptiness because I knew the damage couldn't be undone. Then there was her. I filed for divorce. I tried to be civil, but every interaction reminded me why it had to end. The marriage I thought was built on love had been a carefully maintained lie. She tried to explain, to cry, to promise it wouldn't happen again, but my heart had hardened. There was no coming back from what she had done, not for us, not for me. Signing the papers was surreal. Sitting across from her in the lawyer's office, I kept thinking about our first anniversary, our first apartment, our first kiss. It all felt like someone else's life, someone I had once been, but wasn't anymore. After it was final, I left the office and didn't look back. I didn't call her. I didn't call Matt. I just drove, windows down, letting the air hit my face, trying to remind myself I was still alive, that my heart still beat, that I could still feel, that I could still move forward. It wasn't easy. I kept thinking about the what-ifs, the memories twisted with betrayal. I thought about how my dad's choices had echoed into my life, how a brother I'd never known became the ultimate punchline in some cruel family joke. But I also started thinking about myself, not as someone defined by their mistakes or betrayals, but as someone who could rebuild, who could survive. I started small. I took up running again, early mornings before the city woke up. I reached out to old friends I'd lost touch with, people who reminded me what normal felt like. I even signed up for a photography class, something I'd always loved but never pursued seriously. It was grounding, distracting, and slowly, it reminded me I existed outside of this pain. One night, I found myself staring at the stars from my balcony, feeling the hum of the city below. I thought about Matt and her, about the wreckage they left behind. I thought about my dad, who probably didn't even think twice about the lives he fractured. And I thought about me, standing in the middle of all that chaos, deciding what came next. I realized something important. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't control what anyone else did, and I couldn't let their choices define me. I had to survive this, not just exist. I had to carve out a life that was mine, even if it looked different than what I imagined. And slowly, over weeks, months, I started to reclaim it. Small victories first. Laughter without guilt. Waking up without dread. Driving without the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. Then bigger ones. Making plans for a solo trip. Saving up for a new apartment. Reconnecting with parts of me I had buried under the rubble of lies and family drama. I'll never forget what happened. I'll never forgive her. And I'll never forget the shock of seeing Matt walk away with my wife in that parking lot, hand in hand, laughing like it was nothing. But I also realized that their choices don't get to control me anymore. My father's abandonment doesn't get to control me. The only thing I can control is how I move forward. So I do, one step at a time. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe I'll find someone who doesn't betray me, someone who won't hide the truth. Maybe I'll stay single forever. Maybe I'll even find a way to confront my dad, to make sense of the wreckage he left behind. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I have a choice. And that's all I need right now, a choice. If you made it all the way to the end, thanks for sticking with me. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps me share more stories like this. Thanks.